Functions is to JavaScript what a lightsaber is to a Jedi. They are one. Today we will look at the basics of functions in JavaScript. Today we are going to learn about JavaScript functions. I'm going to share some small but very important little details and tips that took me a long time to figure out, but are very important and confused me when I started to code. First, before we start, let me explain what a console log is. A console log is an integrated function in JavaScript where we can log whatever we put in here on the console. So let's save that and we can see we get a 1 on the console. We will use that throughout the tutorial to show the functionalities of the JavaScript functions. And the console log is not something that is really used in a live application, it's more for a development environment and to debug your application. So let's write our first function. We have two different kinds of functions in JavaScript, function declarations and function expressions. Let's start with the function declaration. We will start that with the keyword function, and we want to name our function. And with our function name, we will use something that's called Camel Case. Camel Case always starts with a lowercase word and then continues with every following word with capital letters. After the name, we continue with parentheses, and then with curly braces where we put in our function. We click enter, and this is where we usually write our function. So let's start with logging a number 2 on the console. And we see if we save our changes, nothing happens. That's because we have to call the function first. We call our functions like this, with our function name and then parentheses. We click save, and now we get the number 2 on our console. So let's copy that and console log the number 3 on the function, so we should have 2 and 3. But what happened? We have 2 number 3s on the console. What happens with function declarations if you have the same name for the function? The last function that is written overrides the previous functions. So here and here, we will call only this function. This one is completely left out. So let's rename that function. And we get 2 and 3 on the console. In JavaScript functions, we have something that's called parameter and argument. So let's delete the first function and turn this into a function with an argument and a parameter. In JavaScript, we can use the function to do something, or we can use the function to have an input and an output. With the parameters and argument, we can achieve that. Where we call the function, we can put in an argument, let's say here the number 4, and use that as an input where we write our function. We would put that in here as a parameter. So what we would do is invent a descriptive keyword. In our example, we could put in number, and that will be passed down here in our function, and we can write number here. So what happens is where we call the function, we put in an argument that will then be passed as the input for this function. And that parameter will be passed down into our function. So let's save that, and we can see we get the number 4 on our console. What we can also do is duplicate that, and then we just get it twice. So what actually happened is that the number 4 got passed in here, and then that got passed down here and here. So let's reverse that. And this is what a function with parameters and arguments is all about. In JavaScript, we have something that is called a pure function, where the output depends on the input. So let's write a pure function now. So it's not really different, we just delete console log and we return our number. We save that, and of course nothing happens because we don't do anything with the number we return here. So what we can do is console log where we call the function. And now the number 4 is printed on the console. Now we have a classical example of a pure function where the number 4 is the input for this function that then returns here and will be console logged down here. So how I like to see it is that our function name toFunction is a little factory that has an input and an output. To illustrate that a little bit better, let's add 5 to the number we put in here. So we should get a number 9 in the console. So our little function factory adds the number 5 to whatever number we put in here. So what we can do is not just have one parameter, but multiple. So we add another parameter up here, and add them together. So what we have to do now where we call the function is also to add another argument. And now what happens is the first argument will be put in here and then will be added down here. And with the second argument, this will be put up here and then will be added down here. So we have 10 plus 20 should equal 30. And this is a great example for a pure function with two parameters. So those were function declarations. Let's continue with what are function expressions. So here again we have a normal function declaration. So now let's change that to a function expression. What we have to do with a function expression is set that equal to a variable. And we can delete the name here. And then we see that we still have the same functionality. Let's change that to 15. Of course, we have to call the right name down here. And now we have something that we call a function expression. And by the way, this turned into what we call an anonymous function. So the function itself has no name. With the function expression, we just set a variable equal to an anonymous function. So with modern JavaScript, we have something that's called arrow functions. Especially with function expressions, this comes in very, very handy as it makes the code more readable and more condensed. So what we can do is delete this function keyword and add what we call a fat arrow here. And we still have the same functionality. To make that visible, let's put in here 25 and we have 25 on the console. To condense it even more, if we just have one line down here, we can delete the curly braces and put that on the same line. And we can see before we had 3 lines of code where we now have just 1. But now let me show you a key difference between function declarations and function expressions. So we have 2 function declarations up here, fn1 and fn2, that will console log 1 and 2, and we will call them down here. So what happens, for example, if we call fn2 before fn1, is that this function gets executed before the fn1. But what we can also do is move where we call the functions up to the top here. And it will still work. Not so much with function expressions. So let's change the functions to function expressions. And we can see we get this error, cannot access fn2 before initialization. So we have to put them down here. Because the way how JavaScript works, it will go from the top to the bottom with function expression, whereas with function declarations, it will hoist them to the top. What hoisting is beyond the scope of this video, but this is just one thing you have to know about function expressions. So let's delete this one here. When to use function expressions and function declarations is beyond the scope of this video. But in short, if you need a function that is available globally from everywhere, you use function declarations, otherwise you use function expressions. But this is very generalized. So let me show you what we really can do with JavaScript functions. So here on the right side, we don't have the console anymore, we have the HTML document. And we want to greet our user, maybe also in different languages. So let's develop our JavaScript to be able to do that. First, we want to write a function that is able to add something to our document. So you don't have to understand that in detail, but what we do with this function here is to create an element, an h3, which is a heading tag, then have an input up here where we will add to the h3 element and then append that to the document. So if we call that here, and we add an argument, let's say hi, we can see it gets printed onto the document. So what happens is that the argument we put in here gets passed up as the parameter, and then this will be put in here. And when we run the function, this will be appended to the document. So let's delete that and write a function that will greet our user. So now we have a function declaration here with 2 parameters, greeting and name. And we want to return greeting, a space in the middle, and the name. So what happens if we call our greeting a user function? Let's try it out. Of course, nothing happened because we didn't put that on our document. So what we can do is wrap this function into our add2dom function. And now we have hello John on the document. So what exactly happened here? First, we have this function with the 2 arguments. The 2 arguments will be put up here. Those will be passed down here and will be outputted as a greeting, in our example hello, a space, and the name John. Then that again is an argument inside the add2dom function, which the output, or what we have as a return here, will be then added to add the dom as a parameter here, and then put down here to set equal to the h3, which will then be appended to the document. And then the beautiful thing is, if we want to scale our application, we can just copy that and, for example, could put in here our Spanish greeting or different names or whatever we want. I hope this helped wrap your head around what you can do with JavaScript functions. Of course, this wasn't everything there is to know, but it should give you a nice overview of what you have to know about the functions in JavaScript. I hope this video helped. If it did, leave it a like, and if you want to see more videos like that, don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.